Do you have a vintage PC lying around but don't have the right keyboard for it? They're becoming harder and harder to find. Or perhaps like me, you want to use your own USB mechanical keyboard or just a cheap one off the shelf, and you wish there was a way you could just plug that into your vintage PCs to do some testing or whatever you want to use on them. Well, today I'm going to show you a way that you can do just that, and it's with this device here. It's called the HIDman, and we're going to be putting it through its paces. It's coming up right now on the Retro Hack Shack. So for a while now, I've been testing various projects to hook up a USB keyboard to older PCs. I've tried out many of these projects and even designed my own boards with custom firmware, and I've had mixed results. Well, a few months ago, I was suggested a video by YouTube from someone named Andy, aka Rastiri, as he's known on his YouTube channel, the Rastiri, not really sure how to pronounce it. Also on GitHub, he is also known as Rastiri, and he came up with this little project here. It is the HIDman. Now, this is an open source project, but you may know some of his other projects that he's put out over the years. There was a WeC, which was kind of like a mini retro PC thing that you could hook up and it would run DOS and I think maybe even Windows, and you could play games on it. He kind of designed that from scratch, so he kind of knows what he's doing when it comes to these little projects. And when I saw his video and I saw exactly what the HIDman can do, it was exactly what I was looking for. Well, almost exactly, and I'll talk about that more towards the end of the video. But what is the HIDman? Well, let's talk about it. First of all, if you want more information about the design process, the build process, exactly what's in here, highly recommend that you go check out that video. I will link to it in the description below because Andy goes through all of his design process on building this thing and how he tested it and what boards he used and all kinds of stuff. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, highly recommend going to check out that video. But put simply, this little device takes USB input from a keyboard, mouse, and even some joysticks, and it outputs PS2 compatible output to your PC, and it also outputs XT class communications for older machines like an IBM PC-5150 or an IBM PC-XT 5160. Those early machines and early clones supported the XT standard for the keyboard, and so he actually made this compatible with XT as well. What does that mean? Well, it means you can use this to connect pretty much any standard USB device, not all of them. He doesn't promise that they're all going to be compatible, but the standard USB devices that you hook up to this will be able to talk to any PC from the very first PC, which was released in 1981, all the way up through the introduction of USB late in the Windows 95 era, when USB was added to Windows 95 and then of course Windows 98. This is great for me for testing because I don't have to hunt. I've got probably, I don't know, 40 or 50 keyboards here in the shack, and I don't have to hunt around for, various ones when I'm doing testing. And what led me to want to even do this in the first place, as I mentioned in the intro, was this keyboard here. So I did a video, not a whole lot of you watched it, I'll be honest, much to my chagrin, but I did a video on how to build a neo retro keyboard, as I called it, which is a modern mechanical keyboard with cherry type switches, and I picked out ones that modeled the keyboards, the old keyboards that I liked best, which are an Alps clicky key that were in many keyboards of the day. However, the problem is it is very clicky, and I have at least 3 people in my family that have borderline misophonia, I think it's called, where they're very noise sensitive. And when I'm going to town on this keyboard, it does get quite loud. And so I was banished basically, or the keyboard was banished to the garage. So I can only use it in the garage now. And I thought, well, maybe there's a way that I could use this keyboard that I love and connect it to retro IBM PC compatibles. And that's exactly what this device does. As I mentioned, there are other devices on the market. So this one uses a Raspberry Pi Pico to do the translation of the keyboard and mouse function. It's called the PS2 to XT PC PS2. I can't remember exactly what it's called. I'll put a link to it up on the screen. But that's a good project, but it does require some level shifting. It requires some custom cables. There's also some very involved projects which I'll put the name of here that actually is very modular. So you can use a Raspberry Pi and then use that to do the keyboard translation, and you can connect to tons and tons of different devices, way more than this device will allow you to. But that is actually quite expensive if you don't want to build it yourself. It is open source, but by the time you get done with all the modules and stuff, you're going to be sinking a lot of money into that. And it's just a lot. It's just a lot to manage. This little device, small little board, a couple of chips with some great programming that Andy has done. And what you get out of it is you get USB inputs and you get PS2. And I didn't mention this before, a serial mouse output as well. He's also included the capability for those devices that have a single PS2 connector and you're supposed to use a splitter to input PS2 mouse and PS2 keyboard. You can actually do that on either one of the ports, and sometimes you have to fiddle around with them a little bit to see which one's going to work for your device, but it will actually output that combined signal. I've been testing this out and I've been super happy with it, and in fact, I'm so happy with it, I went ahead and reached out to Andy and made sure it was okay, even though it's all open source. The designs are on the GitHub page. If I put this in my store to sell to folks that live in the US or on this side of the world, because it can be quite cost prohibitive to ship stuff from the UK to other countries. Even in Europe, it can be cost prohibitive. I get a lot of people ordering RGB to HDMI devices on my site from Europe and from Australia and places like that, just because it's cheaper for me to ship them to them than it is to ship them within Europe sometimes. So I've made this available on my website, retrohackshack.com/shop. And I've also made available either the board itself, just the bare bones board, or you can get the case for it as well. And I've also included all the cables that you might need, a variety of cables from the PS2 splitter that I mentioned before, to the PS2 extension cable, to the serial extension cable that you're going to need for the mouse. All of those things should be available on the website. The firmware has been pre-programmed by me, but you can obviously update that firmware yourself if a newer update comes out that you want. And yeah, it should be ready to go. One of the goals I have with what's going on with my eye and everything is to get some more open source designs available for people that don't want to go out and build them themselves, and make those available for people so that they can just order them easily. Like in the case of this, if it needs programming, have it pre-programmed and ready to go, because not everybody knows how to order PCBs or knows how to load software and things like that. They just want to buy a device and use it. And I think it's great to support the open source community and the people that are willing to make their designs open source, because that helps all of us. So I'm hopefully going to have not only this, but a lot more open source designs available for people to buy on the shop in the future. So this thing has a lot of great features, and it has a really unique way of configuring it as well. But instead of talking about that, I want to show you it later after we test this thing out. So what I want to do now is grab my IBM 5150 and move it over here to the table, and we'll start there and really put this thing through its paces, because sometimes the older technology is the most picky when it comes to supporting devices like this. So let's go ahead and test it on a original IBM PC, the 5150, and then we'll test it on a AT machine. That is a computer that takes an AT keyboard input and a serial mouse connection. And then we'll test it on a PC from the 90s, let's say, that's going to have the dual PS2 input ports, and make sure that the keyboard and mouse are working the same there as well. So let's get started. I'm going to break my back and lug this 5150 over here to the table. Whew. All right. Got the 5150 over here and the 5154 monitor, the EGA monitor. I believe all this stuff still works. I haven't turned it on in a while. This 5150 was the PC that I started my channel with. And you can go back and look at some of those original videos where I added, for example, a third and fourth floppy drive to the IBM PC-5150 and talked about the the RGB to HDMI device that I sell on my website. I hooked that up to here and got that running on an HDMI display. Fun times. And you can see this one's been modified quite a bit. I won't go into all of this, but there's some more modern disk drives here, half-height disk drives that were added at some point to this thing. And then I actually added this 3D printed faceplate that connects back to an XT to IDE board that I'm running in this for storage. So it looks like it's got a old style full height disk drive in here, but actually this is just a false front here. And the light blinks like you'd expect and everything else. Anyway, this is the 5150 that I'm going to be using today. I need to explain a little bit of how this is connected. Well, we've got the two USB ports here on the front, and I've got those connected to modern USB keyboard and modern USB mouse. So that's what's going on in the front of the device, or actually I don't know which is the front and which is the back. Anyway, coming out the back, I've got a serial cable, male to female serial cable coming out for the mouse, and I've got a PS2 extension cable coming out for the keyboard. And then on the other end of that, I've connected it to this converter, which converts PS2 into the 5-pin, the larger style 5-pin DIN that the computer is going to expect. And this can be used either with XT computers or with AT computers, because the way that you switch back and forth between those protocols is with the button here. The button will light up. Once the computer comes on, it will supply the 5 volts needed to run the device, just like it would with any keyboard that you attach to it, because that's the way the protocol works. That's going to power the device. This is going to light up in blue mode, which is the normal AT or PS2 style keyboard standard. And when I click that, it'll go to orange, and that'll be XT mode. And then we should be good to go on this 5150. All right, well, it looks a little weird without a Model F keyboard sitting here, but I've got everything connected, so I just have to hit the clunky switch, and hopefully this will turn on. Oh, there we go. Yay. Video is working. Well, I'm going to go ahead and oh, there it goes. I was just about to reboot it because I had waited so long, and it finally came up with a 301 error. One nice thing about the HIDman is beyond the button that allows you to switch to XT mode, which I'll do now. Now it's orange, so it's an XT mode. But the way that Andy developed this, he made this light respond to inputs from USB devices. So as you're troubleshooting, maybe the device isn't working and you have a problem on your computer, like I did recently on the second channel, where my PS2 ports weren't working and it ended up being a simple fix. You can go check out that video on the second channel. But I was able to, just by looking at this light, determine that when I did things like move the mouse or typed in on the keyboard, oh, and we can see it working, but it was lighting up the light, which means it was receiving the USB input. So I knew my USB devices were working, and the problem was actually on the other end or in my computer. So that's a really nice feature. So I'm in XT mode. I think this 301 is a keyboard error. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. And that's probably because this was not in XT mode, but it is working now, as you would expect. So we can do something like a DIR, which will take a while. In fact, I think I'll do a /P because of the XT to IDE. When I do a DIR in this thing, it takes a long time to count up the remaining space. But if I do this, it'll just do one page at a time, and I can actually break out of this without waiting. So certainly all of the commands are working. Do Control-C, you can break out of that. I can see my directory. All of the keys are working just fine. No problem. Number pad, if I turn numlock on, yep, number pad is working. So yeah, this keyboard is working as far as the computer knows. It's connected to an XT keyboard, which is compatible with this device. So test number 1 working. Let's just go ahead and fire up, check it, and see if the mouse is working as well. Now, of course, since this is DOS, this is version 5.0, I think, of DOS, and we're waiting for that prompt to come back because it's counting up all the space. You can see the LED flashing away down there. But because this is DOS, we're going to need to load a serial mouse driver. So I'm going to go ahead and use Cute Mouse, which I have here. And by the way, the second time, it's just that first time when you do dir on the XT to IDE that it does that, because there's so much space there and the system is so slow. But I should be able to load CT Mouse here, and that should load a driver for me. Cute Mouse appears to be locked up. Okay, I rebooted, it's coming up, and by the way, the HIDman remembered which mode it was in. So it's still in the amber mode here, which is the XT mode. So let's see if that 301 error goes away. I forgot how long it takes for the 5150 to boot up. It takes forever. In fact, it's taking so long I can check my blood sugar. Oh yeah, I'm still getting the 301 error, but it seems to be working. And my blood sugar is going down. I can feel it, so I need to get that fixed. All right, anyway, let's go ahead and try the Microsoft Mouse driver. M-O-U-S-E. And it says mouse driver installed. Now we can go over to check it and see if we can run the test and see if it sees the mouse. Okay, it said look for mouse and it said present. So I'm assuming this is going to work. We'll go to input devices. We'll go to mouse. And let's see. It says testing. Press each mouse button. Yep, I can see it. It's changing. I can move it around. Woohoo! Look at that, baby. No lag, no nothing. Yeah, I was doing it kind of fast there, so it wasn't, I wasn't taking my time. It eventually got there. But yeah, all of the checks and check it for the mouse have passed. This mouse is working. It thinks it's connected to a serial mouse. Awesome. XT test has passed. Let's move on to an AT class machine. All right, well, this should look a little bit different. This is the original IBM PC-AT, the 5170. So this thing in AT mode or PS2 mode, same protocol, should work on this machine. So I've got it connected the same way in the back. Serial port is plugged in for the mouse, and I'm using the exact same connector that 5-pinned in to go in there. But this time, when we turn this on, I'll have to make sure that the color on the HIDman is set to blue to make sure that this is working. Now, I don't remember, I think I have a hard drive in here still, the original hard drive. So let's just go ahead and turn it on and see if it boots. And then we can play around with check it and make sure everything's still working on the IBM PC-AT. Hear the fan running, monitor's on, got a beep. Here we go. Now, this is the updated BIOS. The original BIOS in the 5170 sucked, but I've got a different BIOS in here. It's the 286 modular BIOS from Award, and it actually does a lot more than the original BIOS. You see a lot of stuff. It says keyboard error, no keyboard present. So let's go ahead and switch this back to blue. Okay, I've done that now. And then let's just go ahead and reboot it and see if that keyboard error goes away. There we go. Oh, it just booted that time. So it didn't have any errors. Because I just did the soft boot, the Control-Alt-Delete, it just booted, and it looks like it booted off the hard drive. All right, so what I've done is I went ahead and took the same drivers that were on my compact flash card on the XT to IDE, transferred those over to a floppy disk, so I have those now available to the system. And so let's first try running the Microsoft mouse driver, at least I think it's the Microsoft mouse driver. Okay, so when we run it, reads it off the disk, and comes back and it says mouse driver installed. So you would think that that would work, right? However, when we go over and run check it, there we go, if I can spell right, here's what happens. It starts to run check it, but it just hangs right here. And that's it. I can't do anything. Everything's locked up. I tried running it off a floppy disk as well. I tried running check it off a floppy disk to see what was happening. And it got to the same point executing from the floppy disk and locked everything up, and it just kept the floppy drive spinning, but it just stopped. There was nothing I could do at that point. 3-finger salute does nothing. It just, the whole computer hangs. So I'm not sure. I may have memory issues or hard drive issues, or it could be a resource conflict. I've really never used that serial IO card that's in this thing. I've never actually tried to use it, I don't think. It could be that the card is bad even. So, or it could be that the driver's failing. So let me reboot this and we'll load up CT mouse, Cute Mouse, and see what that looks like. If you don't want bad cards messing up your system, you need to turn to today's sponsor, and that's, of course, PCBWay. PCBWay offers low-cost, high-quality PCB manufacturing and a whole lot more. One of my favorite features on PCBWay's website is their project page, where the community can upload projects. You can browse these and order these particular parts so that you can use them yourself. Or you can create your own project by uploading your design and receive 10% back when someone else orders your particular project. So check out PCBWay for all your PCB manufacturing needs, and I thank them for their support of the Retro Hack Shack. Okay, so Cute Mouse has a COM test as well under here. So let's go ahead and run the COM test and just see what it sees. Runs the COM test. Now, this comes back with COM1, and here's that address, 2F8, which before when we were running Check It, it said COM2 was running at 2F8. So that's weird, but the good news is it does see Logitech 3-button mouse, right? So remember this, COM1, address 2F8, IRQ3. So now let's go ahead and load the Cute Mouse driver. See if that works. Okay, it does. And it comes back and it says installed on COM1 and gives us 2F8 as the address, but then it says IRQ4. So this says IRQ3, this says IRQ4, this says COM1. Let's load up Check It and see what Check It says is the COM port in use. Okay, now remember, Check It wouldn't even load. It looks like it's loading now. Check It wouldn't even load with the Microsoft mouse or that other generic mouse driver. It does look like Check It's loading now. There we go. And yeah, we get down here. It says the mouse is present. It went right through, no lockups, no nothing. Okay. So then if we go to configuration, it still says COM2 at that 2F8 address. So not COM1. If I go to interrupts, okay, now this is telling me it's COM2 on IRQ3. So this is all really, really weird. If I go run, let's run a serial port. Again, I think this is all the computer and nothing to do with HIDman, but I want to figure this out. So if we go to serial ports and look at COM1, there is no COM1. It can't detect COM1. If we go to serial ports again and go to COM2, it asked if I have the loopback. No, I don't have the loopback on, but it should be able to run some tests here. So on COM2, it's actually, here we go. It's testing the output and input on COM2, the kind of the internal COM tests. That's all working on COM2. So now, finally, let's go see if the mouse, let's go to the input device, go to the mouse test and see if the mouse is working, and no, the mouse is still not working. That's so weird. Okay, I'm going to get an actual serial mouse and hook it up and see if that changes anything. All right, guys, this is a legit new old stock Microsoft mouse, serial mouse. Never been used as far as I know. Look how clean this thing is. The ball is super clean. They took this out of a plastic package. It was something I found at eWaste. I found a bunch of these. This thing has never been used before. So let's hook this thing up and see what this does, an actual serial mouse, as opposed to the HIDman, see if there's any difference. Okay, COM test comes back again with, it detects the mouse. It's a Microsoft mode mouse. But it sees this as address 02F8 IRQ3 on COM1. So got a problem here. I'm gonna try to figure this out and maybe put a new serial card in here, serial parallel card in here to see if I can get that working. All right, well, I opened up the 5170 here, and this is the card that I pulled out of it. And I also did some digging on -0degrees.com. I think that's the website anyway, with all kinds of early IBM information. And they did note in there that it can be a problem where the computer gets confused when it tries to assign resources and identify COM1, COM2 with the addresses like we saw. It was basically outlining the problem exactly as we saw it. So this is, I believe, the card that would have come with or could have been purchased with originally the 5170. Over here, we've got this 6135933 number here, very IBM-like model number. And down here, it just says comp. That's it. And then it says serial parallel. So I think that is the issue that's going on here, is the known issue with the 5170, even though I'm using the new BIOS or the adjusted award BIOS or whatever. Apparently it's still a problem. So what I'm going to do is I take this out. I've got a ton of these IO cards, 8-bit, 16-bit cards that I can try out. The first one that I just happened to lay my hands on was this one. And this is a card from a manufacturer called SIIG, and they are still making cards today. If you go out on their website, you can still find expansion cards. This one is called a TwinCom, ROC TwinCom Rev 1. Hey everybody, Future Aaron here. I'm just going to save some time and tell you that this card did not work, and I couldn't find the jumper settings for it. So instead of taking you through that painful experience, we're just going to move on to the next card I tried. All right, well, I've got another board. This is an AST-IO Mini 2, and it looks like it has 2 serial ports, a joystick port, a real-time clock. So this is quite capable. And I looked at the dates on this card, and it does say they date to either 85 or 86, depending on the chip. So this puts it in the ballpark of the 5170. Let's put this in and see if I have any better luck. All right, card's in, it's booted up. Let's go ahead and try the COM test again. Let's see if it sees anything. Come on, baby. There we go. It's COM1, IRQ3, address is 2F8. So, I don't know. Will it work this time, or will it still have that weird problem? Let's see. Yeah, and it says there's no mouse on this machine. All right, well, I'm going to have another look at that card. Maybe I can change the configurations on the card to somehow force this thing into resolving that conflict. All right, well, I was able to find the manual for this card. It must have been a popular card. It was actually on -0degrees itself. And that was really nice because in addition to the, describing the card and everything you can do, I also printed out this page, which shows the various configurations for the jumper settings. And you can see right down here, there is an option. And it's funny because whoever had this manual initially had, self-documented in the manual. Whoops, let me move that down a little bit. Like all the places where they had jumpers, etc. And, they had starred this one. And I'm almost wondering if whoever had this manual originally and marked it up had this exact same problem, because here we can see there's an option for enabling COM2 at IRQ3 instead of COM1. And I'm wondering if they had this exact problem with the PC-AT, the 5170, and perhaps had to change their jumpers to fix this problem. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in and mess with the jumpers a little bit and see if I can get it to react the way that we want to. Again, this is all just down to the 5170. Right now, everything on the HIDman appears to be working. The reason I'm documenting all this is because if I were the one buying this and I had a 5170, the first thing I would try to do is to go ahead and connect the HIDman to the 5170. I would probably end up in a problem like this and have to go through it. So I'm hoping that all of this effort with the COM ports is going to help someone else down the road. So let me adjust those jumpers and see if we can get this thing to finally work. Okay, so I just went ahead and changed those jumper settings, and when I looked at the card again, it turns out that this was the configuration of the card already. So this jumper here, I think that's E9 was shorted, and I think that's can't read it, maybe it's E15. Those were already connected. So this was the configuration the card was in. So what I did was I went ahead and put it back in this configuration with COM1 enabled and IRQ4, I think it is E16 and E8. Those are the ones that are now shorted. So I went from this configuration to this configuration. And by the way, it's worth mentioning on the original 5170 serial card here, there are shunts over here. So it's possible, I didn't look it up, it's possible that you could mess with these shunts if you want to, and maybe fix this with the original card if that's all you have. But I didn't look it up, so I'm not sure if these jumpers over here are for the settings for those serial ports, you know, RTS, CTS, etc., or whether those control the I/O address settings for those ports. But it's possible that you could use the original card. I'm just not sure. And yes, you can. I was able to look up the settings for those shunts, and here they are. Pause the screen if you want to try this and you are having the same problem as I am. And while this is booting up, the other thing that should be clear by my testing, maybe it's not, is that the real problem here is that some programs just assumed that the COM ports were at a certain address location. And I think that's true with Checkit. Checkit is just assuming that address 2F8 is going to be COM2, when in reality, it could be COM1. But perhaps Checkit is hard-coded to recognize 2F8 as COM2, and that's why this isn't working. Maybe another diagnostic program would actually work okay. So, but let's just see what we can find here. I'm going to go ahead and load up COM test. All right, so now we've got COM1 at 3F8. COM1 at 3F8. I believe that's where it's supposed to be, and it's using IRQ4. So I think this is the default configuration that Checkit should be looking for. So let's fire up Checkit and see if this is finally working. Okay, it says there's no mouse present though, so perhaps we still have an issue. There's no mouse on this machine. What? Oh, of course there's no mouse on this machine because I didn't load the mouse driver. I skipped a step. Let's go back and load the stupid mouse driver. Okay, installed on COM1 in Logitech mode. Finally. Let's see if this works. Hey, look, there's a mouse present on the machine. Let's go in and do the tests. Input device, mouse, the magic moment. Yep, look. It is finally working. Move the mouse to the top, move the mouse to the bottom, move the mouse to the left, move the mouse to the right. Ta-da! Everything works. The mouse is working fine. And of course, the HIDman is working. It was only configuration issues with the 5170, which is peculiar in so many frustrating ways, but it is a classic nonetheless. All right, so with that out of the way, HIDman's working on the AT machine. We need to move to a PS2 machine and see how the HIDman works there. All right, well, now we're on to the PS2 machine. Hopefully this will go a little bit easier than that 5170. This is the machine that I built with multiple floppy drives, and it allows me to test disks because it basically can test any disk I can throw at it in terms of floppies, not 8-inch, of course, but 5 1/4 and 3 1/2 and so forth. And then also a zip drive. So it's pretty cool. There was a build video I did of this on my second channel that I can link to for you if you're interested in seeing how I put this together. But it is a PS2. It has PS2 keyboard and mouse inputs. So I've changed things up a little bit on the HIDman. I have taken off the adapter because I don't need that anymore. So I've got the PS2 extension cable coming from the keyboard port on the HIDman going into the machine. And then I've got another PS2 extension going from the mouse into the mouse input, the PS2 mouse input on the back. And that really should be it. It's already in AT mode, which is compatible with PS2. So they use the same protocol. So let's go ahead and turn it on and see if it works. Yeah, and here we go. The PC is booted, and I have this going immediately into Format QM, which is what I use to test the floppy drives or floppy disks because I have so many of them. When I'm working in here, I'll set this up in the corner or something and just continuously swap out floppies, weeding out the bad ones. But anyway, yeah, this looks like it's working. I don't know if there's a mouse driver loaded though, but we can certainly hit, let's see, you can hit escape to quit out of this. Is the keyboard working? Did I hook this up backwards? Do I have the keyboard and mouse the wrong way around? I might have. There we go. Yeah, I had the keyboard and mouse plugged into the wrong port. So a little bit of user error there, but we can go ahead and exit out of this. And as you can see, everything is working as far as the keyboard is concerned. Let's go ahead and load up a mouse driver just to make sure that the mouse is working. There we go. Cute mouse loaded up, and it installed the mouse on the PS2 port. Okay, we're in Checkit 3.0, and it says that a mouse is present as expected. Here we go. Press each mouse button. Let's see. Well, I can already tell the mouse is moving, so yeah, this is working. And we can move the mouse to the top, to the bottom, to the left, and to the right. There we go. Everything is working. So this was a lot easier than the 5170. It just works, and that's because there's really the information about the COM ports, of course, had to be put into the BIOS because they're built into the motherboard. There's no additional card with jumpers on it that you're going to be installing for your PS2 ports, right? That's built into the motherboard. So the motherboard, in this case, if things weren't working, I could go into the BIOS, change the settings there, and get it to work. But we didn't have to because it's just standard PS2 and it just works out of the box like it should. And so now we have a working XT system, an AT system, a PS2 system, and I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that for those in the UK or Europe, this also supports Amstrad, so those old Amstrad PCs. I believe there is a setting in here for those as well. So if you hold the button down on the HIDman, you can go to a white color, and that, I believe, supports the Amstrad PCs. So if you're in the UK, you want to use this for your Amstrad, you are in luck. Now, one more thing I want to show you, since we have all this set up and we know it's working, I want to show you how you can get to the advanced configuration. This is probably one of the coolest features. I don't know if I've seen this on a device like this before. So what Andy did here very smartly was, instead of having like an SD card, and you put a config file on that, put the SD card into the HIDman or something. No, what he did was he actually made the configuration built into the device. And the way that you access this is just by pulling up a text editor. And because this thing can send keystroke commands, it can actually type out the configuration into a text editor on your machine, and you can control it from there. So let's just go ahead and see what that looks like. Okay, so I've just gone ahead and pulled up the built-in DOS editor that comes with it, and we can go ahead and hit escape, and we're just here at a blank screen. And if I hold down that button on the front for more than a couple seconds, there we go. There's the menu. It typed out the menu for us, and it, of course, can interpret the commands that we're typing into the keyboard. So if I want to see the keyboard settings, I can hit 1, and it types out the keyboard settings. I can turn on advanced USB, or I can type on O1 key mode. I'm not sure what O1 key mode is. Advanced USB, I think, basically sends all the signals if there's extra keys on the keyboard, for example, or what is it, the N wait timing and things like that, that sometimes messes things up. If you really want those to be passed through to your vintage computer, you can turn on advanced USB and that will do it. Hit escape, it prints out the rest of it. Let's take a look at the mouse advanced features. So there's the same thing for mice. So you can turn on that advanced USB setting for mice. And there's an IntelliMouse setting, which supports IntelliMice, I guess, the ones that have like 5 buttons on them or something like that. And then there's also a game controller mode. Now, I'm not going to be showing you the game controller, but basically the way the game controller works is it takes in the input from a basic game controller, basic USB game controller, and then converts that either into arrow key presses or mouse left, right, up, down, and of course buttons. So either mouse buttons, or I'm not sure what it does for the keyboard, what it uses for the fire buttons on the controller. But yeah, you can go ahead and hook up a rudimentary USB game controller and get it to play old school games if you want to. Last but not least, there is an advanced menu, and I believe this menu has changed maybe with the bleeding edge latest revision of the firmware, but there's things in here that you can do. For example, actually, I've never tried this PS2 mouse status. We should try that in a minute, but I want to talk about the log HID data first. So if you come up with a controller, like a wireless controller or something that doesn't work, you can actually log the HID data and then submit that on the GitHub page. And Andy will take that and see, or someone from the community will take it and see if perhaps they can actually get that working based on the HID data that's coming from the USB device that you plugged in. But let's try this PS2 mouse status. I kind of want to see what that is. Okay, there we go. So rate, resolution, scaling, data reporting. So I guess maybe if there's some sort of error with a PS2 device or some connection to the computer or something, you can use this information to maybe debug that. I don't know. But anyway, that's how you get into the advanced menu. You probably, for most people, they won't have to use this unless perchance they, perchance, what am I talking about? For most people, you won't have to get into this menu unless you do come across USB keyboard or mouse that for some reason doesn't work with the HIDman. And like I said, that's there for that. But otherwise, I don't think for most people you'll be using this anytime soon. So I mentioned that I'm really pleased with this, except for one thing, or actually I had one idea, and that is to make a very similar device using the same chip, but for early Macintosh computers. You may have seen some Macintoshes in the wild, maybe people selling them or whatever, but quite often you can't find the keyboard to go with it. Either the keyboard was misplaced or lost. If you find one with a keyboard, it's going to be quite a bit more expensive, especially the early Macintoshes that had the phone jack style connector that went to the original keyboards that came with the original Mac and then the Mac Plus. Those are really hard to find. And then after that period, Apple implemented Woz's protocol, the ADB protocol, which allowed you to connect ADB compatible peripherals like keyboard and mice up to later Macintoshes, starting with the Macintosh SE and going right on up through the G3, which was launched in, 1998 or something like that. I think that was the first Macintosh that didn't support the ADB protocol. So most computers that were released in that time, most of the Macintoshes anyway that were released in that time, had ADB ports built in. And I thought it would be really cool to take this same design, and instead of having two PS2 outputs on it, it could have one ADB output on it and one old style Mac output on it for those older Macintoshes, the 128, the 512, and the Plus, so that then you could use a USB keyboard with those systems as well. So not sure exactly how to get that done. Andy was open to it, but I know he's busy, and I might take a crack at the code and maybe fork the project and see if I can get that done, and then that can be pulled back into the main project later. If that's something that you want to help with, let me know. I can get you involved or make connections or whatever needs to be done. I think all the code is written in C, so you'd have to be familiar with that, but I would love to have one of these to be able to provide to people that let them connect to pretty much any Mac during that time period. So that's what I'm thinking there. It's a big project, but it would be really fun to do. So again, these are available in the store right now. You can go pick one up. I have about 20 of them available or so. And what I need you to do, if they sell out, which I'm sure they will, go ahead in there and click the button that says, let me know when this is back in stock. And what I'll do is I'll use that to gauge how many to order. I don't know if I need to order another 20 or 50 or 100 of these things to have them available in the store so that everybody can get one. But if they're sold out on the website, please click that link that says notify me when they're available, and then I'll know how many to order. I can get these, I think, built pretty quickly, at least within a matter of weeks, 2 to 4 weeks. I think I can have them ready again once they sell out. So get one while you can, and if they're sold out, click that button. That helps me immensely. If you like modding old vintage computers, you might like my video where I added a modern LCD screen to a TRS-80 Model 4 where the CRT was broken. I'm going to put a link to that video right over here, along with another one that I think you might like, and I'll see you in those videos next. Thanks for watching, and thanks for supporting the channel.
End of line.